Welcome to Beyond the Headlights,
where we turn our pain into purpose
and raise our voices against drunk driving. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about the current laws that we have in Missouri surrounding alcohol or just being under the influence. And then we're going to talk about a little bit of the history of how we got to where we're at today with the laws of drinking and driving and just driving under the influence. And then we're going to discuss where we are going and bills that are currently working its way through Congress and things like that, and kind of where we want to be, because every step is a good step in the right direction, but there's still so much work that needs to be done.
There is, and Missouri has some of the loosest laws in the country.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, even if you get caught drinking and driving or driving under the influence of anything, you may not even be convicted of that if you have the right lawyer or the right connections. It could be bumped down to something else. So we're definitely going to share that. Okay. Do you want to share some of our experience at the Capitol, like when you first got there, how you felt, and kind of why we were there? And then I'll go in and do the same.
Sure. Was that your first time?
That was my first time being at the Capitol since first grade, I think.
Okay. Gotcha. That makes sense.
Field trip.
So I have been to the Capitol before for one of the bills that we're going to discuss. And it was a situation where at that time, that was last year, and we were going door to door to each representative to pitch this bill.
See, and I didn't even know that was a thing. Mm-hmm. Like, I've been in this journey so much longer, and I had no clue that you could do that. And I remember after learning that, I called my grandma on the way home. I was like, did you know you could do this? And she's like, I had no idea either.
Yeah, because they're elected officials, they work for you. Mm-hmm. So you do have right to go in and just start chatting with them, which is a very cool thing that more people need to take advantage of, because the people that do take advantage of it are actually the lobbyists. So the lobbyists know that trick, and so they are working on whatever business or company they represent, and more humans not represented by a company need to take that same position, because it's powerful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was there last year, and I was supported by MAD then too. It wasn't my bill. It wasn't something I was introducing. It was just something that Cecilia Williams, who we'll talk about in a minute, was trying to push through. So that was my first experience, and it was a backseat role. So it was different than what happened last Monday. That was on April the 7th. We were invited to go with MAD for a candlelight vigil for victims of impaired driving. It was the beginning of Crime Victims Week, and victims of drunk driving, drug driving are victims of crime. It is a crime to drink and drive, and people don't like to phrase it that way, but when you hit somebody, it's our stance that you've and they die, you've murdered them, because it is a crime and you shouldn't be doing it.
And even if you don't kill them, it's still against the law, and it's still a crime.
Yes. So it was an emotional day to begin with, because you walk in, they've got pictures everywhere. It was in the rotunda, so all the lawmakers had to walk past us to get to their offices, and that was the point. We wanted to be visible. It started at 9 a.m. I got there a little bit before you did, so I had a chance to look at the pictures and kind of settle in. They give you a candle, a battery-operated candle, for the moment of silence. But law enforcement's there too, and there are some municipalities that are really, really supportive of drunk driving laws and the crime of it in general, and they show up and they support. One is Burns Mill. Hazelwood shows up a lot. Wow. Yeah, there are some really good,
and that just speaks volumes
it
too.
Does.
Like, I would love to see their stats, compared to other counties. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because they have a passion for it. They see the effects that it has on families, and it is heartwarming when they show up to those events to honor the victims too. And law enforcement, they're not immune, because drunk driving can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter what your status is. Law enforcement is, unfortunately, officers have been hit by drunk drivers as well, and their families. So it was nice. We got in there, and we knew there were going to be several speakers. There was a pastor. There were some representatives and some victims' families that had an opportunity to speak. And I had already settled into the moment you got there and tell your perspective.
Yeah, so right when I walked up the steps, I was already nervous because I hadn't ever been there as an adult, and I'm walking into this alone. And yes, like, I know I'm meeting you, but like, I'm so worried about getting to the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And the moment that I actually got in there and I saw all like the big pictures like on display and the stage and just the people like in general just there, I lost it. And I was not expecting that. Not many people get to see me cry, not even family. It's usually just my husband that gets to wipe those tears away. But like, I was a sobbing mess and I felt so vulnerable in the moment. But I think I struggled because this has been such a long fight that will forever affect my life and my kids' life, that when I got there, I was like, every representative or every lawmaker, everyone in Congress, like, sitting behind those doors has the power to give me the justice I need. And I have to beg to be heard. I have to beg for Corey and Parker to be enough, to be the right person to help us change this. And it was just, there's so much weight. And I know that the changes that we want to be made will happen in this building. And so I was basically just sobbing because I so badly want to be heard, but I can also see it and feel it. And I can envision the day that the change happens there and we're back there again and we feel so different, but still with tears. And it was a lot.
Very good way to put it.
It was so heavy.
It is a heavy experience, and it is very overwhelming knowing that, first of all, that you're there and that people have the power to change it, but then also knowing, yes, they do have the power to change it, so why hasn't it been changed?
Yes. So it was hard because it's been over a 10-year fight for justice that still is yet to come. No significant changes in drinking and driving laws have truly been made that could have saved my family 10 years ago. And so, yeah, it was just a heavy day.
And that's kind of how we weigh it, isn't it? That we're weighing it a bit, like, if this law were in place, would it have saved Grace?
Like, I know we can't, I know we can't take back what happened, but if I could change something that could have saved them, I will feel like I did a job well done for them. And it's a lot of weight. It's a lot of pressure. And afterwards, like, getting to watch you talk to people, I so badly wanted to go to lunch afterwards and like just recap. But like, I have been working so hard on just setting personal boundaries for myself and listening to myself and knowing what self-care I needed. And so I knew as I sat in my car and I was by myself still sobbing that I just needed to go to sleep and I would wake up and I would feel better again. And so I
Self-care is important.
I drove the hour and a half home. I decided not to get lunch, even though I'm very much a lunch person.
No, well, let's go back a step. So the candlelight vigil was from 9 to 11, and it was super emotional. That hearing the other victims' stories, watching your child's face on the screen rolling through the slideshow, again, seeing, well, the pastor that spoke, he had lost a friend in high school, college, high school, and he got choked up talking about it.
Which was probably over 60 years ago.
Right.
Like, it wasn't
this
just
is a pain
yesterday.
that never goes away. And for him to put himself in that moment and allow him to be vulnerable just shows that you never will get over it. You will get through, but not over.
And we talk often like how we're so scared that like our people like will be forgotten.
Right.
But he in that moment was what I needed, I think, that day, because he showed me that even 60 plus years later, he still never forgot his friend Tony.
Yeah,
like, he still never forgot him.
Yes.
He still went into doing their career choices and making a difference, and his passion became advocating against drinking and driving. And so it was just, his message was still like sad and pulled on my heartstrings, but it was so comforting too.
Absolutely.
I needed it.
So after that, we're already feeling drained, and I had an appointment that I had set with a representative. I sent out an email to every single representative in the Capitol, and I heard back from a lot of them, but a couple wanted to actually make sit-down meeting to talk. And so one of them was directly after. We had an opportunity to speak to Fox 2, and so that was good. We were able to continue the message in media so that could carry forward our message. But then we raced from that to Representative Irwin's office.
Yeah.
And he and Representative Violet agreed to talk to us for a few minutes. And so what you were referencing was we talked to them for 20, 30 minutes. It was a while. They gave us a lot of space.
And they were very much engaged. They asked questions. They seemed like they thoroughly cared and wanted to help it make a change. And, I think oftentimes people don't realize how serious this issue is until they're directly affected. So they were open to just learning about how serious this is in our area.
And Representative Irwin is former law enforcement, former Navy SEAL. So he has a public service record of his whole life, basically. And so after we had that heavy meeting, and like you said, they were so engaged and so wonderful to chat with us. Then we had a couple afternoon meetings, and we decided to go get a bite to eat, and that's when you needed to take
I
a
had to
break.
take self-care for sure, and my husband talked to me all the way home. I was going to be home in time to get the kids, and I was like, you know what? If it's not going to be a burden for you to leave work early, I still need that. And I slept the rest of the night. He got the kids from school. He made dinner. He did all of the things.
That's wonderful.
And it took years for me to choose to put myself first.
To be able to be brave enough to ask for help.
Yeah, because I never did. I basically had a moment, I want to say last year, to where I had a real good breakdown. I had an anxiety attack, panic attack that was going for 5 days straight. Nothing would stop it. And it got to the point where my best friend was like, if you don't call your husband or your grandma, I'm going to call them now. You need help. You can't do this alone. And I think that was an eye-opening moment for me, though, that it's okay, especially in these situations, to not be okay. And it's just been a hard pill to swallow, but I'm getting better at it.
That is a very good point too, because you're in your 10th year.
Yeah, 10 years.
And so I know in 2 weeks it will be 2 years for me. And I have been spiraling since Monday.
It's hard
at the Capitol, because
it's so hard leading up to it.
And I think that it's healthy for you to admit that even 10 years in, you need to ask for help. And that's encouraging for me.
And it's nice that you mention a date, because my downward spiral happened 5 days before Parker's birthday. And it's going to make me sound like a bad mom in the moment, but at the time I didn't realize that the calendar date was coming. But my body subconsciously knew, even without me, my brain realizing it, and it was still affecting me. And so if I find myself having more panic or anxiety attacks, or more on edge, or just emotional, I look at the calendar, because chances are there's some big date coming up that I didn't realize in the moment, in my body subconsciously.
But I've been unkind to myself, because I'm thinking, okay, pull it together. It's 2 years. It's not the first year. It's the second year. And I have been very impatient with myself, because it has been affecting the way I talk to my husband, and the way I feel like I don't want to leave the house right now. I just want to stay home. I want to stay
peaceful and safe.
It is safe, yeah. And I know it's because the date's coming up, but then the other side of my brain says, knock it off. It's just a date. It's not the first year. So pull yourself together and go get to work. And I think the fact that you saying 10 years later, you recognize that you need to stop and take care of yourself, that gives me encouragement to allow myself to feel it. Because I feel like society doesn't want you to feel it. Just
your heart and brain don't always align, and that's something that I realized. But I worked so hard, physically worked, for jobs or businesses the first 8 years that I ran from it. And once I couldn't run anymore, there wasn't any anxiety medicine left or panic medicine left that could mask my feelings. It just quit working. My body was too used to it, and those feelings broke through, and I couldn't run from it anymore. That storm cloud caught me. Because you always got to go through the storm. It's going to catch up to you. And I think year 8, I finally started going through the storm finally. And I was hoping the storm came when my kids were older and moved out, but
Sure.
it caught me sooner.
Well, then couple that with the feelings of the Capitol and knowing that
it was there.
Maybe in our lifetime we'll see change. And I think it was a very good thing. I think overall it worked out. We did have a couple meetings that you didn't get to sit
I'm so
through.
excited to hear about those.
Yeah, but you have more opportunities because they want to meet with us again.
Yay.
So, yeah.
Yes. And like each time you do something new that's uncomfortable, it gets more comfortable each time. So I don't anticipate the next time I'll be a sobbing mess. But even if I am, like the third time, maybe it'll be a little easier.
Yeah,
but like
okay.
It's the unknown, you know, like, and there's so many emotions, but now like you kind of know what to expect and it's not as scary anymore.
Right. And I think that part of it too is because we had such a good meeting with Representative Irwin and Violet, I kind of feel like you have to preface that with the fact that you will go into offices that they are not as receptive.
Yeah.
And we had a very good meeting, and we take that and we put it in your pocket, and then you move on to the next. And so it is similar in a way to our careers, where sometimes we have very great clients and others were told no, and there's a lot of rejection. So we had another meeting, and we'll talk about it more when we get towards the bills that are in Congress right now. But the second one I took as a rejection, and it wasn't a rejection, but one of the MAD representatives was there with us for that one. And I left the room and cried because it wasn't a firm yes. Yeah. And so she had to walk me back and say, okay, where did you hear the no? Because there wasn't a no. It just wasn't. It wasn't the same message that we had first. And this is so deeply personal.
Yes.
It's almost like you're rejecting my child.
Yeah, that's how I genuinely feel. And that's why there's so much anger with it. Because oftentimes, I feel like for the past 10 years, people have cared in the moment until they realize how hard the change is, or they tell you what you want to hear to make you feel better in the moment. And I'm so used to that feeling. And that feeling's so scary because I just want you to be truthful. You know what I mean? Like,
but
and I want
soft.
them to mean enough. I want like my baby and my husband and your daughter to still mean enough that they alone, their picture enough, like should be enough to provoke change.
Exactly.
Like, why do I have to beg for you to change something? Why do I have to beg to be heard? Like, don't you know how amazing they were? So it's definitely like a mental block that like you got to climb over and be ready for.
No,
it's hard.
I agree 100%. And you're right. They should be enough that it doesn't matter what the story is behind it. There should be nothing that we have told them that would make them say no.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. They were innocent.
Yeah.
They deserved better. So, I don't know. I felt like after we visited the Capitol that it would be cool to discuss like the history on alcohol laws or just driving under the influence in general, because it was pretty eye-opening to me that like we haven't been at a .08 like legal limit for very long. Like it hasn't been. We've talked a lot about like how you're feeling when you get to that point, and it's really mind-blowing. So between 1930 and 1970, the National Safety Council recommended a first ever blood alcohol concentration limit of 0.15, and that was very lenient. Feelings of that, like you're vomiting, you're stumbling, you cannot in any way like operate a vehicle safely. Like there's 0% chance that that's going to be done safely. So it just like, it blew my mind that like that was their recommended limit back then between 1930 and 1970, and it was still lenient. Like, and even then when you got arrested, like there weren't very many like consequences.
Oh no.
Not that we have very many now, but we've still come a long way since then. So, you know, there wasn't a lot. Between 1970 and 1990, Mothers Against Drunk Driving started finally bringing awareness to the dangers.
And it was a mother who had lost her daughter, and she finally said enough is enough and started just doing the same thing, like just petitioning people to wake up and realize that this is a preventable crime.
An amazing journalist that we both have worked with before, she oftentimes tells me that like there's no one that she feels can bring change more than like a passionate mother. And I don't think she knows the godsend that she has been to me, just to bring so much encouragement and hope, or just feeling like we have someone else on our side. But like that statement alone is like, you know what, you're right. Like moms would do anything for their kids to bring, to protect them.
100%.
And we couldn't necessarily protect them from this, but we can do things that would have.
Yeah.
And here we are. We'll fight to our last breath to make sure that it's
100%.
done. The legal drinking age was raised to 21 in 1970s, and that used to be 18. So even then, that was so...
Well, and there's even now part of the Power of Youth, which is a program from MAD. In their presentations, they go to high schools and other places and speak to young people and discuss how your frontal lobe of your brain isn't even developed until you're 25.
Yeah.
And so when you are doing drugs or drinking consistently at those younger ages, you actually stunt the growth. And so when you see kind of a stoner or burnout in their 30s or 40s or 60s, or they're stunted at that age when they were heavily using. Yeah. So it's an incredible thing that it used to be 18. And then, of course, in other countries, there is no limit.
And
but I think there's a healthier relationship with
1970s
alcohol.
wasn't really that long ago. I mean, it doesn't feel that long ago. I wasn't even alive then. But, like, you know what I mean? Like, 1970s just feels still so recent when I sit and think about, like,
I was alive then. I could be your mother.
I know. The blood alcohol concentration level was lowered to 0.1 in 1980s, and then in 1990s, they finally lowered it to the 0.08 that we know.
Yeah, it was a process.
Yeah, so it took some time. It took somebody fighting. We actually have interviewed a girl. It was her stepmom that was hit by a drunk driver, and it left her wheelchair bound. But she was the one that helped make that 0.08 possible in the 90s. So that was really neat.
Yeah, absolutely.
She also worked for MAD for a few years and whatnot. So it just shows me that, like, if we just keep going, something will change. License suspension for drinking and driving didn't begin until the 90s. So before the 90s, you could drink and drive. And I mean, it was still more of a slap on the wrist because you would still have your license to continue to do it again.
And we both are on the same page that we don't believe that suspended licenses work at all.
At the end of the day, you didn't follow one rule, so why give them another that they can just break again?
Absolutely.
And there's a local county that releases their arrest records every week, and that is like good time small town news for us to scroll through that and see who you know or whatever. But almost every person on there, I would give it a good 90+% is on there with a suspended license. So how well are they really working?
Not working at all.
They're not. Something good that happened was in 1982, once they did lower that blood concentration level, fatalities declined by 36% in 1982.
Which is huge. That's a huge decline.
So that was a very, very big jump between MAD raising awareness, alcohol concentration levels coming down. We started seeing some change and some progress being made. So it felt really well.
Yeah, that's a good number.
So with an interlock ignition device, you have to blow in that device to see if alcohol is detected at all. And if it is, your car won't start.
Right. And even if you start it and you're fine, if you've been drinking and it's just before that and because I think it's like an hour. It takes an hour for that to register your blood alcohol content. So like every 20 minutes or so, you still have to continue to blow into it.
So they didn't even start using those like as frequently until the 2010s. So like there was no way to really track if somebody was, drinking and driving or not once they had already like offended. So that I can't wait to see more stats on that to see how that has helped.
Right.
They don't have to be used all the time now, but like I can't wait for a day to where it's more.
In some of the cases that we're going to talk about in a minute, one of them is for first offenses. From the very beginning, you have to get an interlock installed. And if you stay, if you follow the law for the next 5 years, you're going to have it taken out.
And I feel like that's great.
I think it's actually 2 years.
And then some of the fatalities. The majority of drunk driving fatal crashes during holidays involve drivers with an alcohol concentration level of 0.15 or higher. 17% of the fatalities, though, were 0.01 to 0.07. So it was still, that would be under the legal limit, but we have 17% of fatalities being caused when you're still at a legal limit. So should we drop that?
Well, and some states have. Some have.
Utah is a big one.
Yes,
they are 0.05.
That's right.
Yeah. They have like one of the best drinking and driving laws in the country. It's
strongest.
Utah. Yeah. 25% of fatalities happen at 0.08 to 0.14, and then 58% is 0.15 and greater.
Yeah. And that number in particular it would make sense to have something on the books that said, even if it's your first offense and it's something that high, your BAC is that high, that you should not receive the same penalty as somebody who has a lower blood alcohol count. And
so combining these, we're at already like almost 80% are 0.08 and higher. 80%. So if you're at 0.08 and higher, like 80% chance, like
you're going to hurt somebody or kill somebody.
It's crazy.
Yes, it is.
And we're still, fighting to be heard. The Missouri Department of Revenue is where I got the following information on basically things that can happen if you are caught drinking and driving. I read a statistic somewhere that, and I believe it was on the Mothers Against Drunk Driving website, that on average, somebody will drive over 80 times drunk before they ever get caught. And
I think that is a mad statistic.
That is so scary to think of, because a first conviction may not truly be their first conviction, because if they got
it's
a lawyer,
first time getting caught.
Yeah, it's your first time getting sentenced, if anything, because if you have a good lawyer or you know the right people or you have enough money to throw at it, it could be, dumbed down to something else, or it could, like you said, simply just disappear. So then your second one would really potentially be your first one if they didn't knock that one down again too.
Absolutely.
So I feel like statistics are very much still on the lower end, because how often are we seeing these people get out of this?
Right.
But a first conviction is oftentimes a Class B misdemeanor. You can spend up to 6 months in jail, which I feel would probably be slim to none on your first conviction,
right?
Because we're not really seeing that even on multiple.
I've never heard of that happening on a first offense.
You could have a 90-day license suspension, which again is pointless. You could have fines up to $1,000, which I could easily see, and potentially 2 years of probation or alcohol education programs. And then you may have to have SR22 insurance, which is just insurance that costs more. It's for people at higher risk,
right?
But that's still not even a requirement. It's a possibility. All of these are possibilities, not requirements.
Did the driver that hit you have insurance?
She had bare minimum insurance for the state of Missouri and Tennessee. I publicly say this out there, that all I got for financial compensation that wasn't because of my own responsibilities, was $25,000 to pay for all health issues that my husband suffered, all health issues that I had, a funeral, piecing my life back together, and that $25,000 I had to split with my lawyer 35+%.
Right.
So
crazy.
At the end of the day,
so
being compensated maybe $13,000 to pick up the pieces, start a new life. And that's not us saying that we want to be financially set, but at the very end of the day, I shouldn't have to pay for a funeral I didn't cost. I shouldn't have to pay for medical bills, or I as the victim was punished.
Right.
And then with your second conviction, you can get a Class A misdemeanor. Again, we want to be transparent that all of these rules and laws are very fluid.
Right. It depends on the judge.
Yeah.
It depends on who your attorney is. It depends on your blood alcohol content. Potentially, it may not be like that now, but there are bills in the works that would change that.
It'll depend on if the law, the officer did everything correct and checked every box. Because if they mess up even just a little, it goes out the window.
Exactly. Right.
A lot of these, they're just not set in stone. A lot of times they're negotiated into something much smaller, and so your first offense can stay your first offense or not a first offense, but a second conviction.
And also, if you've hurt somebody, if you've hurt or killed somebody, these are sliding upward, obviously.
A second conviction is a Class A misdemeanor. You get fines up to $2,000. you'll get a 10-day minimum jail time, which even that, with a maximum of a year. But even that, I feel like is so, I haven't heard of anyone getting a second, with a second conviction going to jail at all. Like it's usually a fine. It's some classes. Yep. They recommend 30 days of community service and an alcohol monitoring device for your second conviction. These aren't set in stone. It's just a recommendation, I feel like, at this point.
It is. Yeah.
Third or more convictions, it goes up a little more. But again, 30 days to 10 years in jail, fines up to $10,000, 60 days of community service, a 10-year license suspension, which we already share how we feel about that, and an alcohol monitoring device. However, like you said, once you get into like actually killing someone, the sentencing is different. You can get up to 15 years in jail, which again, very rare. I've never heard of it.
Not for a local person.
No.
What was the celebrity that we talked about? It was the husband and wife that were in the golf cart.
Yep.
And she got killed in a different state. What was that?
The
South
bride.
Carolina?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so she got 25 years, but again, that was South Carolina, not Missouri.
Yeah.
And it was a big public story. It went nationwide. So just for a normal, I have never heard of anybody getting a DUI that resulted in death that got up to 15 years.
Well, and both of our offenders that killed our families or our people, we don't have experience with that part, and I'm very grateful. But like, we had a local teen that did kill somebody. She killed a handful of people, and she got 7 years.
Yeah.
So even that, you know what I mean, was
you would
way
think
less.
it would be compounded for each person.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's concurrent sentencing.
Yes.
So like, it looks like they get a lot, but they're serving it all the same. So it's really just
and
the
that
one.
Local person, if she behaves, she'll get out in less than 7 years easy. And carry on
I think
with
it's
her
like
life.
a must of serving like 20-something%. Like it's so low, and I feel like that's just a slap in the face to victims' families.
It is. It's insulting because it means their life didn't really matter.
Yeah. And oftentimes you can face wrongful death civil suits. However, like I spoke about only getting 25 grand, splitting that, with a lawyer, I feel like a lot of people who are reoccurring offenders, they don't have their life together anyway. So they're not going to have assets.
File a civil suit against.
So we could have filed a civil suit in our situation, but no one that could be held responsible had any assets over $250,000.
Right.
So in that case, someone could just file bankruptcy. They don't get it. You don't get it. Nobody gets it. It's gone. It's wiped. So yes, you could have a wrongful death civil suit, but if you don't have anything to offer, there's nothing to take. Right. And you could go to court and get awarded $10 million. But if they don't have $10 million, that's just a random number.
Nothing
I made up.
From nothing.
You're
is
not
going
to get nothing. So anything times 0 is 0. And I am proof of that. And then you could have fines up to $10,000. But again, if you don't got it, how are you going to pay it? They can garnish wages, but they have their workarounds. So we've come a long way, but we still have so far to go.
So I've been speaking a lot at victim impact panels sponsored by MAD. And at the at the beginning of the session, you're given a survey. And you'll do your speech. They'll listen to everybody talk. And then they have to answer some questions anonymously, of course. Yeah. And one of the questions is, what offense is this? And it goes from 1 to, I think, 8 for the choices. And multiple times, many times, you'll see that it's a multiple offense situation. The other question that it will ask is, how much have you spent on fines, attorneys, etc.? And it's very, very common to see upwards of $40,000, $50,000.
And that still is not
it's not a deterrent.
Them from drinking and driving over and over and over again.
Right.
Like it still isn't changing that. And there's just some people that aren't going to change until it kills them or they're in jail. But in these situations, they're not going to be in jail very long. There aren't very many punishments right now that are affecting them in the ways that it should.
Yep, you are right. So one of the things that we talked about when we went to the Capitol was, I have a situation where there are no social host laws in Missouri.
Yeah.
So getting social host laws on the bill for me is something that's close to my heart.
See, and that, bringing it up, like my situation, it even affected me. Because
it would have, yes.
You know, we couldn't hold anyone accountable, and the lady that killed my family was coming from a wedding, and they didn't have a bartender serve them. They were all brought into this hall. The hall couldn't be held responsible because they didn't serve it. And the bride and groom couldn't be held responsible because they didn't serve it.
That's right.
There was no proof who served it. The people could have brought it in themselves.
Right.
So again,
Missouri has dram shop laws, which hold, it's on the books as taverns, but bars, essentially, they hold them responsible if a person is overserved. So Missouri has social host laws, which if you drink in a bar or tavern, will hold the bar or public establishment responsible for overserving you. But they get training on how to identify levels of drunkenness, intoxication. But Missouri does not have social hosts. So you're exactly right. If you are at a wedding and they do not have a bartender, if it's just, even if it's like your friend that's acting as the bartender, there's no liability. None for the hall, none for the person that served the alcohol. And it goes the same for homeowners. So if you allow a party to happen at your house and people get drunk and then leave and drive and kill somebody, the homeowners are not responsible.
Yeah. And that just, it's mind blowing to me, because anytime that like I have just an acquaintance or someone on social media tell me that they're getting married and it's going to be like at a hall without a legit bartender, I'm always like, take out extra insurance if you're willing to be that risky.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you know, there aren't any laws that would technically incriminate them right now.
But it's a thought that everybody has, that there's like a common thread among all of us that assumes that there is a liability.
Yeah.
And so that was what we were speaking to the representatives in Jeff City about last week. And everyone that we sat down with said the same thing. What? Are you kidding? Missouri doesn't have social host laws? No, sure don't. And you assume, because it would make complete common sense that you would, but it is not on the books, and it has never been on the books. And Missouri is only, there's only 12 other states like Missouri that do not have it on the books. The rest of them do. And research has showed that the social host laws would help with teen alcohol consumption and drug use, because parents would be more actively involved in preventing them from driving after they've been drinking. It actually would help lower the number of house parties, because again, the adults would know that there was some level, like it would either be a misdemeanor and or a civil consequence. Missouri has none of those, even criminally at this moment. One study showed that local social host ordinance were associated with a 7% decrease in the likeliness of teens drinking at parties, which doesn't sound like a very big deal, a 7% drop. But if you think of the number of parties that kids have, I mean, it's kind of like an every weekend thing. So it's a huge number of parties. And if you drop that number by 7%, it's actually a huge number.
And then I always think statistic numbers like are lower in this category, because not everyone's truthful. You don't really know who's all doing it. You don't know, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like it would probably even be greater than that.
Yeah, I agree. And also the enforced social host correlates with a reduction in alcohol-related injuries, hospital visits, and crashes involving underage drinkers. Because one of the important things to remember is if you have a teen that's at a house party and the teen gets alcohol poisoning, again, those parents are not technically responsible.
And that's crazy, because with homeowners insurance, like I feel like we've been taught that like if somebody gets hurt on your property, that like your homeowner's insurance would cover it, but that's not even the case in this situation.
No, you can fight it, but chances are you're going to lose because it's not a precedence in Missouri.
Yeah. So like, let's say somebody got hurt on a trampoline, would that cover it?
Yeah, because you take the alcohol out of the situation and now parents are responsible. It's only involving alcohol. That's because I don't have the quote in front of me, but there's a quote in case law that basically, this is a loose summary, but basically says you can't infringe upon people's right to have fun. And if they use alcohol for enjoyment, you can't infringe upon that. So yeah, trampoline, you could sue the homeowner's insurance.
Good.
Yeah.
Get hurt with a trampoline, not with alcohol.
You have a kid die of alcohol poisoning in somebody's house? No, sorry, you're on your own.
Yeah. It's mind-blowing
that,
like, we take a trampoline injury more serious in Missouri than we do alcohol injuries.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But also in states where social host is on the books, it shows more parent accountability, and that equals a cultural shift, which is all we want.
Yeah.
We want
it's
those
a
social...
conversation. We just want the conversation to happen
we want
between
those social
parents
norms to
like
change.
Just adults, kids, just in general.
Yeah, and you're right. It does change that attitude. Better to drink at home on my watch than because that's not really the point. You really don't want to encourage kids to drink. And actually, Missouri does have a law that says parents can allow their kids to drink in their own home. Not to the point of intoxication, but they have that right to allow them. But you also can't allow my kid. I mean, I think that's rude. Like that should be a common sense thing. You're not allowed to allow my kid to drink at your house if I don't allow that at my home.
And then like an education piece on that is like, are many people aware that it stunts that frontal lobe development?
Right.
So would you still give it to your child if you know that you were knowingly doing harm to their brain development? Probably not. Right. You know what I mean?
100%.
So educating, there needs to be more education out there too. And that's part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, there's such a big shift from alcohol consumption and alcohol abuse. And when you've reached the point of intoxication, I believe even at point 08,
absolutely,
where it's starting to affect your judgment and your ability to react and all of those things, then you've developed a problem, and that's intoxication. So not to get into whether you allow your kids to drink at home or not, but it all comes back to the intoxication point. It's beyond just having a glass of wine with dinner.
Be responsible.
Yeah. Another law that is on the books right now. So the social host thing is not on the books as of yet. That's something that we're just starting to fight for. And this session is closed for Congress right now. We'll have to revisit it in November, and that's when we're going to really start pushing hard. MAD does support this bill.
And that's why it's important to start building those relationships with people in Congress, just so we're ready in November for those big, attempts.
And you've had the tough conversations, and now they're ready to write something to put on the books that's going to pass. But one law that has been in works for like 2 years now is Cecilia Williams' law, and it's called Bentley's law. In Missouri, it's called Bentley and Mason's law, but in other places they've just dropped it to Bentley's law. And the reason for this law is that in April 13th, so 2 days ago, in 2021, in Jefferson County, Cecilia's son Cordell, her daughter-in-law Lacey, and her 4-month-old son Cordell Jr. were killed when David Thurby, who's 26 years old, hit them, T-boned them as they were leaving a parking lot. He was convicted of 3 counts of second-degree involuntary manslaughter on January 11th, 2023. And side note, he's already been up for a parole. It was denied, but... Yeah, it's
but
still
to know that it was
soon.
a possibility, like why do they even get the possibility that soon? I don't know. After killing 3 people?
I don't know. And I know it caused a lot of stress on their family. The thing about victims' families is that the stress never stops. It's just you get one little victory and then you just wait for the next blow because the blows just keep coming and coming. Yeah. So Bentley's law was introduced in Missouri first. It required that drunk drivers who kill a parent or guardian would have to pay child support for the surviving minor child. So in Cecilia's case, her son Cordell left behind surviving children that Cecilia has been raising. The law would either garnish wages or do something to the effect that until the surviving children turn 18, the convicted offender would pay for child support, which would be huge for people that grandparents or whoever.
Because oftentimes, like, when you have grandchildren, like, you're working towards retirement. You're not ready for daycare cost or school clothes or all the extra. Your grandkids are, financial responsibility is just for you to have fun when you want to.
That's right.
This is a big a big thing for her to have to take on.
It really is. It causes a lot of additional stress. And Cecilia's point is that even though it may be difficult to enforce, because a lot of times when, let me backtrack for just a second, because they obviously have to serve their time first.
Yeah, so then would they age out before they even get payment?
True. So the hope would be the offender would serve the time, come out, and then start making payments until the child turns 18. But yes, you run the risk of the child phasing out, and they can't force you to pay for something while you're incarcerated. That just isn't practical. But her main point was, if we can get something on the books like this, that would be one more deterrent against drunk driving. Now, of course, like we've talked, they're willing to pay thousands and thousands. It's because alcoholism is a problem. Yeah. And truly, if you've had multiple convictions, you do have a serious problem. Yeah. But the funny thing is Missouri was where this first passed, and it's been Missouri was where it was first introduced. Missouri has not passed it. But other states have: Kentucky, Maine, Tennessee, and Texas.
That's wild. So is she going to these states fighting in their courtrooms too?
She has gone to other states.
How is she getting it passed there?
So I think the difference is the culture. The difference is the places that she's talking. I know it's even been passed in some other countries. So she does a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of advocacy via Zoom. She does travel to other states to talk about Bentley's Law. And in some places, they've changed the name to include other children. Like in Tennessee, it was renamed Ethan, Haley, and Bentley's Law. Where is that? That's in Tennessee. In Kentucky, I believe it's called Melanie's Law.
So how did the name come to be? Is that one of Cordell's sons?
Yes. Yeah. Bentley and Mason are surviving sons. And yeah, she, and having a conversation with Cecilia, she has said she doesn't care what it's called. No. She just wants it passed because it's the right thing to do. And I think that we're in the same boat. Like it would be a legacy to have your child's name on a bill. Yeah. However, the ultimate goal is to get the bill passed, and call it whatever you want.
That's still a legacy that was created.
It is. Yeah.
Because a mother never quit fighting for her child.
Exactly. And Cecilia won't stop on this bill. No. She will get it passed in Missouri at some point because she is a fighter.
It's just like almost like a slap in the face, essentially, for your home state. Because your home state can't care enough, but these other states are willing to support you and support this issue. So.
I agree, because it makes sense. I know that first trip to the Capitol involved this bill, and listening to Cecilia fight for it with all of her heart, and letting herself be vulnerable and willing to let the questions come, because it doesn't matter what you ask me about the particulars of this bill. Right is right. Yeah. You know, you can question where the funds are actually going to come. That's a legitimate question. Let's get the bill on the books and then figure out, is it going to be a wage garnishment? Is it going to be some other restitution that's just going to be piled onto them? And like in your case where there's no money to be had, that's okay too. At least it's a deterrent.
It could be something that worried them. You know what I mean? Like the offender. Maybe they'll think twice because they don't want to have to pay child support. Right. You know what I mean? But
it'll just be another thing that's tacked on to the fines already.
Yeah. And it could, like income tax even. Like it could be something.
That's right. Another one that is going to tie into the BACs, the blood alcohol content, Representative Mark Sharp is imposing stricter DUI penalties on people that have a 0.15 or higher, because that's a higher level of intoxication. And this one is spearheaded by Deborah Weinstein. Her son David was killed in 2011, and the driver that hit David was a multiple offender and had a high BAC. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon at 3:00. And when she speaks, she loves to point out, just like you, that it doesn't have to be after like late at night or early morning. It's not when all the drunks come out. The drunks are out all the time, 24/7. And I know drunk is a derogatory slang of saying it, but they are drunk or high.
That, and you think about that time frame, and it really isn't that wild to me either, because even in our industry, how many happy hours are we invited to that like it's
or a drink
being offered
lunch.
To us, or like lunch, or like it's not a wild time either.
I agree. But Representative Sharp says that Missouri has some of the loosest laws and ignition interlock laws in the country. His push in honor of David would be that even first-time offenders would get those interlocks on, especially if their BAC was 0.15 or higher, and it wouldn't be a negotiation. It would be, you couldn't kick it out or plead it out. It would be a mandatory for first-time offense with a high BAC.
What is your thoughts behind interlock ignition like systems? Like, do you personally feel like it should happen after their first conviction, no negotiation out?
I do.
Or that's where I'm at too. I think that no matter what, your first time, like this part of it, even if you have a good legal counsel or you know the right people, even if they drop it down to where it doesn't look like it's a DWI in your record, I still think no matter what, you should have to have that.
At their expense. It should come from the offender's expense. They should be responsible.
Still have the SR22 insurance because you are a higher risk. You've proven that you are a higher risk. I agree. Those are the bare minimums for me for a first offense.
And really, if you think about it, it's a Band-Aid, but it's a Band-Aid that works. Now, when the interlock comes off, are they going to start drinking and driving again? Possibly. I mean, maybe, but at least for that time period. It's such an
inconvenience to have to blow into that device every, few minutes. What'd you say, 20 minutes?
Right.
Like, it's such an inconvenience that maybe they would think twice about having to do that. You know what I mean? Because the fines aren't enough.
Yeah. And just like we've said this whole episode, Representative Sharp has said offenders can sometimes plead down to a lesser charge. They can avoid the DWI label completely. And additionally, outcomes vary depending on judge, jurisdiction, and whether or not the case will go to a trial. So if this were a situation where it's like you're assuming that the officer does all the things the right way and it gets to court, I think 100% of the time it should be a mandatory interlock and at least keep it on there for some set period of time and that they're at least safe for that window of time. Yeah. Again, with the 17% drop, he has claimed that in places, this is Representative Sharp, that states that have enacted this law see a 7% drop. And in Missouri, that would equate to 14 people a year that were kept alive and safe. So loosely talking about statistically,
still
this is,
low.
14 people. I would be so happy if Grace was one of the 14.
Our kids could have been one of, could have been one of them.
Yeah.
And even then, I still, again, feel like that's probably a low number.
Right.
Because you don't know how people are truly being sentenced, even when they kill somebody.
I agree. I agree. And the last one that I had done research on to talk about was Senate Bill 672. This was introduced by St. Louis County Republican Senator David Gregory. This would create an integrated warning system that would issue alerts if there's a wrong-way driver on a busy road, highway, or interstate. In theory, it would detect a vehicle that has entered a wrong-way point and is driving in the opposite direction. And the alert would go to emergency personnel. It would have dedicated signage, and it says that it would even introduce emergency alerts to the driver who is in that area. And I don't know if that means like an Amber Alert, something that would trigger your phone.
Like, that's going to help people more than just people with drinking and driving. Because, like, I feel like I've seen on the news even that, like, elderly people, you know what I mean? Just get confused. Or just, like, a regular person getting confused, like, driving. Some of these exits are so confusing nowadays. And, like, the new Winsville exit where you're going down in a roundabout, there's so many times I question, like, oh, goodness, in the beginning.
Is it the right one?
Am I doing it the right way? And I'm, like, just so scared. But, like, if we had this could help so much more than just those that are drinking and driving.
And if you're in the St. Louis area listening to this, what was the what was the location of that wrong way driver that we shared on Beyond the Headlights, where the officer actually rammed into the side of the car to prevent the driver from hitting somebody else? So
yeah, I don't know where that is. I think it was closer to St. Louis, though, like up in the city for sure. But yeah, like talk about the bravery of that. Like to
really
do that,
risking his life.
That's so scary.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are just some of the ones that we've touched on. Legislators in Jeff City, like if you just go on their website and read some of the bills that they're sponsoring, you just have to click on the representative's name. There's a drop down that will say bills that they're sponsoring, and just look at some of the things. I mean, honestly, it's kind of dry reading. Like you're not going to get excited to see, oh, that sounds interesting. A lot of times it's pretty dry, but all of these are ideas that would create a safer driving environment for all of us, not just I don't know, not just
and it is the most of us, because 2 in 3 people will be affected. So if you haven't yet, your chances are great that you will be. So can we make a change before it happens to your family? It's the goal.
That's the goal. Yeah, exactly. So that's my research on the bills that I know of in Missouri right now. I do think that it's interesting to see what the laws are in other states and how strict some of them are. Massachusetts has like a zero tolerance policy for even first-time offenders. There's some really strict laws, actually.
And it gives us an idea of like what state would we like to mimic like our laws after, and what are we doing wrong that hasn't created that copycat, you know what I mean, mentality of like a different state, because we see that it's working for them.
And
why don't we care enough?
I think that's good. When we were talking to the representatives, that was one of the things that I brought up, was that there are 32 states that have social host laws, but Missouri does not. And then the first reaction was, oh gosh, I thought we did have social hosts. But then,
I mean, this happened to me and I thought we did.
And then the second response was, oh, well, if 32 other states have it, let's get something on the books.
It should be, just copy it.
Right. But then you can look at the states that have loose laws and the ones that have strict ones. And it was Arizona that I was thinking of that has a zero tolerance policy, and they can arrest drivers even if their BAC is below 0.08.
Okay. And what happens when it is?
First-time offenders face a minimum of 10 days in jail.
And that would be scary.
It would be so scary.
If it was somebody like me, even if I hadn't been affected of drinking and driving, I would be shaking in my boots to have to go to jail at all. I know. So it would definitely change me.
Even if it was one day.
Yeah, I would be like crying.
Any jail time.
I'd be so scared.
They do insist on the interlock system that's mandatory, even first offenders, and they keep it on the car for a minimum of a year.
That's great.
So very inconvenient. They also can impound the car and not let it out,
and that's very expensive. Very, very expensive.
And you can't get a DUI if you don't have a car. So that would be helpful too. A third DUI offense within 7 years is classified as a felony, and that's without injuring anybody. So that would be huge. A felony on your record takes away a lot of rights.
That affects like the places you can live. It can affect the places you work. It can affect maybe like if you could be even a chaperone in your kid's classroom, because like they go into all of that. You know what I mean? Like a felony affects a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree.
So I mean, I feel like we're making some steps in the right direction, but there's just so many things Missouri has to do before we're safe. And I mean, it'll never be perfect, but we can definitely get better.
Right. And the point is, you want to progress forward as time goes on. You know, it's different from 1970s. The number of cars on the road.
We've made a lot of progress. But there are more cars.
There's a lot more cars on the road. We are very distracted drivers. If we're not playing with our phones, we're playing with our other devices, listening to podcasts, listening to it's and just.
We go back to like bare minimum car insurance like pays out $25,000. And I know that was Missouri and Tennessee. But do we go and look at teen drivers? Should they have higher coverage because they're already at higher risk?
Right.
Or should a first-time offender or even somebody who's driving recklessly at high speed, should they automatically have the higher coverage because they're more at risk? Like, do we need like a car insurance reform as well? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I also should mention too, I did have an opportunity to speak in one of our southern counties. They have a minor in possession program, which is just like the VIP, the victim impact panels here in the St. Louis area. But with the minor in possession, it was super interesting because they are required to attend with their parents, so
which is great for the parents too, because it's an educational tool,
right? And it also is inconvenient, so it forces them to kind of keep track on your kid beforehand, before they get the minor in possession. Otherwise, this mandatory class is going to impact you too, because you're going to have to show up and attend and pay for it. But after they listened to all of us talk, they broke the group in two. They sent the kids to one room and kept the parents in another room, so the kids could have a chance to just kind of talk more openly about what led to their minor possession. It was so in the one that I spoke at, there were about 20 kids in the room.
Wow.
Every single one of them was at a party when they got caught or had just left a party.
Do you feel like every party would result, well, not every party. So if a party is broken up or something, do you feel like every kid would get a minor in possession, or do you feel like even the minor in possession, like, statistics are probably extremely low?
Oh, I'm sure they're very, very low. Yeah, because a lot of times, like you pointed out, the officers don't want to do all that paperwork. So if there's a way
or if there's too many kids,
right,
it'd be hard.
Interesting point. We'll talk more about that at another episode. But yes, it was eye-opening for me, because the fact that it was kids that were in the car that killed Grace, I am super sensitive to. I have a big fear about talking to kids, and it was really opening. It was eye-opening to me, because the kids were very receptive to what we said, and they actually did pay attention. And I don't think they enjoyed getting caught.
No, it's never fun to get in trouble.
Never fun to get caught. But yeah, they were super receptive to it, and it changed my perspective enough that I think that I am about ready to start talking in high schools and moving on from just the victim impact panel.
And I have spoken at quite a few high schools, and like, I do enjoy it, because it's like, if I could just even make a difference just for that one night, and they think about it just for that one night, the night that I talk to them, I feel like maybe, like, it is helping, you know what I mean? Like, and who knows what one of those kids, like, maybe it just stuck with one kid, and they decided to be the voice at a party. So
that's right.
Or what if they went home telling their parents about it, and their parents decided not to get their second or third fishbowl margarita at a
agree.
restaurant.
Right. I agree.
You never know.
And then Thursday, you and I are supposed to speak in Quincy, Illinois at a public library, which is really, really scary for me, because this is an event that the library is sponsoring. I even called last week to find out if anybody had registered, because it just seems so funny for me to think that people would choose to come. Take time out of their life to come sit in the library and hear us talk about what we've been through. But there are people registered. And I think it will be a different crowd, because I'm not sure what to expect.
To be there. And who knows, maybe it's parents bringing their kids. Maybe it's
victims.
Maybe it's victims, or maybe it's someone in the community that just wants to support us. You know what I mean?
But we said we weren't going to quit talking, so we are not going to quit talking.
And you probably know that when you look at the time on this podcast, and we are still going at it. We have so much to say, and we will tell anyone that'll listen to us.
But we'll have to update after Thursday, next week's episode. Maybe we'll update and tell you how
that went. I'm really excited.
I am too.
We'll basically speak anywhere that someone will have us the most part to make a difference. So if you have a place that you would like us to speak at, it could be your child's high school, or even maybe your work, just anywhere where people will listen, that we could make a difference, feel free to reach out to us.
100%. We would love to do that.